Hello, Holly. Good to see you. I like the patch. I like the colorful sweatshirt. Good to
Thank
see
you.
you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Do you see the snow?
I know the first snows. Look at it all. Look at it all. I know. I know. Well, and for those of us who have found a way to love the first snow, here it is, just a little earlier than we might have expected. And
It's
this this doesn't mean we won't have a 60-degree day in December. It just means we won't. It just means we have to find snow pants for tomorrow, really, or tonight. Yeah. And bless us all who have moved since March and haven't found our snow pants, because wet jeans are the plight of a father who has not labeled correctly his snow pants box.
Oh dear, that'll teach
Indeed.
you.
It's true. Well, everybody, I just want to say tonight's meeting, I actually have some new information to share. That's some clarifying information about school models and outcomes. And then if we do have questions, then we'll answer those. But what I'll start doing is sharing my screen. And specifically, I want to just note that, Holly, can you see my screen?
I can. It's beautiful.
Okay, good. Oh, it's beautiful even. I love it. So the folks have been asking, I think at the edge of sanity, or maybe just past the edge of their own sanity. So, when might we go back to the school that is in person, that we know and love, and how might that happen? And I've been saying fairly consistently since August, but more, I would say, iteratively over and over and over since maybe a few weeks ago, that what we want to see are declining numbers, and those numbers to hold really near 10 and in the low teens for us to consider coming back way more in person than we are now. For the folks who are providing a wonderful learning environment at our school resource center on site, the pandemic is alive, and it is a part of all of our everyday experiences, but especially for folks that are working on site, for students who are coming in on site to the SRC, we see what it's like to be together in a pandemic time, and it's not unaffected. So, even being on campus right now is different in terms of social distancing, in terms of also making sure that we're wearing masks and all of that. And so what I want to show here is just a couple things. One is this past week was MEA break, also known as the fall break for teachers. And specifically, I think that what I found is that there was a lot of news reports and a lot of information from the Department of Health about rising case numbers in counties. And so what I want to show is the information that I'll actually be bringing this week and early next week to our working groups. And so we're just starting here with this sheet. Thank you for my long prelude, but I'm just reminding folks here that, and this is again from our school website, but the state guidance for school this year is to use data, so decisions based on the number of positive COVID cases per county. And we, since we serve students in all 7 metro counties, plus a couple others, we use all 7 of those metro counties. And then make local decisions based on preparation, mitigation, and community safety. And so what we're taking into account is how prepared are we? How well can we implement both mask wearing, social distancing, air cleaning on site, surface cleaning on site, and then also staffing and making sure that we are providing a safe learning environment for students and for staff. And so as we reevaluate, if health outcomes are better, then it's more likely we'll have in-person learning. If health outcomes are worse, if there are more virus activity, then it's more likely to have more distance learning. And today is October 20th. This is the week of our approximate reevaluation date. And so I'm setting up meetings this week and early next week again with our working groups. And since this is the first time we've reevaluated, what became clear to me is that the data, say, from 3 weeks ago would have told a very different story than the data that's available today. And so, so I'll show that data. Right now, as we look at percent of test positive by county, again, these rates were below 5% for several weeks, I believe at the end of August and September, which is good. below 5% for this particular data point means, and the light is changing, I'm noticing at so there's a dramatic light effect here. Hello, folks. The percent positive in terms of being below 5% means a controlled spread, and if it's over 5%, an epidemiologist would identify that as a community spread that is considered uncontrolled. And so what we do see here is that, again, in 6 of our 7 counties, we have a spread that is over 5%, ranging here from 5.9% to 6.6%, 6.6% in Hennepin County, our most populous county. Washington County even has gone up near 5%. What we want to see, ideally, are these percentages holding or reducing. And if that happens, then we have one good indicator. If they rise up, we have an indicator that we need to be more careful. And so then secondly, and Holly, is this pretty small for you?
It is kind of small.
Yeah. So I'll just show a general pattern is that in pink, we highlight when a cell in one of these tables indicates a warning flag that we have to attend to. And so up here, where anything that's over 5% is pink. And if the rates get 1 over 10%, they get a darker shade of red. Down here, in terms of COVID case rate per 10,000, I just want to observe, folks, that since the first reporting of this data back for July 5th through 18th, the first reporting of this data that was released for schools to use was at the end of July. I was looking at this. They were saying that if cases, go above 20, then there's a certain change. Above 30, there's a certain change. And as they come down below 20 and below 10, you can expect more in-person learning. What we saw in the summer is that generally in most counties, cases increased. And then we had from early August through early September, mid-September, cases generally decrease in most counties. And so again, looking at this data, we started really working on what would it look like to come back more in person. Since then, the data since Labor Day, when we did start school, I said we really want to see what the data after Labor Day shows, because times of high travel, holidays, times when people gather, those have been shown, incidentally, to have the consequence of raising case rates per 10,000. And so again, even MEA break is a time, I think, both for teachers to take a break and frankly, I think to keep the tourism industry in the Midwest alive through all the Minnesotans that go places on that weekend. In any case, we want to see these cases going down, and instead what we see are quite high numbers. And so, oh, excuse me there. I'll zoom in just a little bit so we can look at that. But in Anoka County, you see the numbers go from 20.78 to almost 26, to almost 29, and that's our high county right now. And that does cause alarm for folks who are working on site with students who have come from so many different places. Specifically, these are the kinds of numbers that we haven't seen in any county since the start of this data taking. And I know from the research and reading I've been doing locally and regionally about these case counts, these are case counts in terms of cases per 10,000 that do rival some of the highest counts we've had since this data has been taken since March of 2020. We are lucky to not see the kind of hospital or emergency room overwhelm that could cause a real danger to a lot of folks. But we don't see the number of deaths per 10,000 that we have seen from COVID in the past. However, these case counts are as high as they've been. And so I point out Anoka County because it is the highest. But again, if we scroll down and look at the other counties, we see only 2 of 7 counties have not increased since last week. And then even specifically, our Scott County is still above 20. And the only county that is below 15 and even showing any promise of hovering in the low teens is Carver County. But again, Hennepin and Ramsey County, the 2 most populous counties, are above 20 and are increased since last week. And so that's not an indicator that we can be more aggressive about going back to school in person. And again, just to show the patterns in our graph, we would like to see, I'll zoom out just a teeny bit here, we would like to see in each of these 7 counties, these numbers declining and really hovering along 10, which is this first line of the graph here. Now, to have these numbers declining and hovering in the low teens or at 10, That's what I've been saying is what we need to see in order to be looking at going back more in person. And what we actually see, though, are in 6 of the 7 counties, the numbers trending not only upward, but upward and above 20. And then really either holding there or showing increases from the prior week. What we want to see, again, are these numbers going down. And what we have been working on, and what we'll be showing to working groups, and then here just a reminder image of over the summer, our working groups gathered in these 4 different areas: health and safety, communications, student support, and curriculum. Those curriculum groups did break up into age-specific curriculum groups. I'm sending out invitations for these groups to reconvene. And what we'll be looking at is some proposed metrics that we are going to use in order to choose between school models. And specifically, we have a little speedometer image here to help people organize what on earth the school models might look like. So we have 5 different categories. Distance learning would be really, truly, literally, everybody is at home unless it's an emergency case that you need care at school. And so this distance learning label over here, even though all of our students are learning through a distance learning model right now, this far red section of the graph over here is if case counts, as shown right here, are above 50 per 10,000. And, excuse me, we're not in that case right now. In fact, for most of this time, we've been between 10 and 20, which is why you see we've been in the School Resource Center, and we've actually been in the most in-person version of the School Resource Center that you will see. And I'll show some details on these models, but as you go from left to right here, we have distance learning is our most conservative, most mitigated model. It's the least number of people seeing each other. The School Resource Center is our way to have people be on site if they need to, but most people at home. And then we have a series of combination plans where some students, some ages could be on-site learning, either in hybrid learning or in person. And then other ages would still be doing School Resource Center and distance learning. And then as we get better numbers, again, shown by these case counts below the color-coded areas of the graph, better numbers per 10,000 holding at that average would allow us to do more. So you can see here, if there are less than 5 cases per 10,000, that's associated with a transmission rate or case positivity rate of less than 5%. We would be looking at planning in-person learning. And so you can follow around along at home, and you can look at these numbers and see we are still living in a pandemic. I saw a Star Tribune headline this past week that identified, I think, some people's experience where it said, record case numbers set in as reality, interrupting a pandemic exhaustion. And I thought, yeah, pandemic exhaustion is a good way to describe that sense of, okay, I've had it. Can't we just try to go back now? And I think the reality is these numbers going up indicate that we are not yet at a point where we have the luxury of being more in person right now. Now, that's not to say we can't gather outside safely. That's not to say we can't keep masks on at the resource center and have that be a secure place to be. But we can't start putting more and more people together without distance and without mitigation. So in any case, this graph hopefully will be useful for you to reference. And then specifically, what I want to share is, here we go. What I want to share is that there's a detailed table that we'll be sending out on Thursday. We've shared this with in-person staff today. I'll be sharing it for comment with all of our staff tomorrow afternoon. And on Thursday, families will get this. But as I start at the top here, this is a detailed table for our Great River school models and how they correspond with public health indicators. And so what you would see here is that distance learning, labeled distance learning at the top, would be if case positivity rate is above 10% and or cases per 10,000 on average are above 50. Generally, then we would only be providing childcare on site for essential workers. And maybe it harkens back to last spring when we had the most restrictive statewide lockdowns. What you can see that the model that we're in right now is actually our most in-person version of the School Resource Center, this second layer down. And so the School Resource Center, SRCC here, is that students are on site if a family opts in. We don't have enrollment requirements. If you need the School Resource Center, you opt in. And that really counts on a positivity rate between 1 and 10%, and that cases per 10,000 are below 30. which we have been in all summer in all 7 counties. But you see one of our counties is actually approaching a 10,000 case per 10,000 above 30. And so this also relies on available COVID testing, right? And so if COVID testing became actually inaccessible more than it is now, we would have to consider going back to a more conservative version of the SRC. And or if case rates per 10,000 in our counties climb, we would again consider pulling back on restricting the SRC only to, say, children of essential workers, FRF families, and high needs special ed students. Or again, if case rates went above 50, we'd actually have to pull back to just essential workers on site. We do, though, have hopeful ideas, and not only hopeful ideas, but specific plans of if the numbers get better. For instance, if the cases per 10,000, say, went below 15 and really held there for a 4-week average, as I've been saying for 6 weeks now, if they held under 15 for a sustained amount of time, and our transmission rate, our case positivity rate was below 10%. And forgive me, epidemiologists in the audience, I think transmission rate is a sloppy term. So if the positivity rate was below 10% and the cases below 15, we would start considering having especially lower elementary students be more in person. If that rate was below 15 and the case rate was below 5%, then we would actually even consider in-person lower elementary, again, keeping SRC for upper L and adolescent students. But you can see the combinations. We actually have 5 combinations, A through E. And so we are prepared. We do have plans. There are some other criteria in addition to these health criteria in terms of staffing, preparedness, frankly, furniture layout that we have plans for, but it takes time to move furniture. And it also takes time to change from SRC only to some kids on campus and some kids SRC. So that's why we're saying that these case rates, again, you can see as they go down, say less than 15 or even less than 10, we start thinking about having more elementary students on site, right? Or if they're less than 10 and less than 5% for a sustained period of time, we'd even consider having all students on site in some capacity. However, the reality that we're living in right now in terms of this table is that we have numbers that are climbing. And so we are still up here in this brighter red category. And in terms of our metrics for how to establish who comes to the school resource center, we do have, in terms of cases per 10,000, our own table internally that we are using to plan around. And then we do know that if cases per 10,000 went above 50, again, we would go to that distance learning model where very few, if any, students were on site. But with the case rates where they are, 15 to 29, we have SRC, and I believe there's a typo there, but SRC-C, right, our most in-person version of SRC. And if case rates got better, then we'd go to one of those combination models where some students could be actually learning in person on site, and then other students would stay in a distance learning model with the SRC available. And so when we send these things out on Thursday, I just want to inform everyone, this is the information that we've been using internally, and what we're going to be doing is looking at it with our working groups and identifying specifically if there are any tweaks or specific changes that we need to make in order to make this best serve our community. And so, no, I don't think we need to look at that thermometer yet. And so I just want to identify, thank you everybody, that when you look at our return website and we're reevaluating our learning model, what we are doing is we're hoping to really be able to use more of these versions of combination learning of A, B, C, or D, as case rates improve. The one thing that we all need to be on the same page about is that if case rates got better in terms of a lower return, and the cases per 10,000 got better in terms of a lower number per 10,000 that really held at a good average, we would be thankful and we would all come back for more in-person learning. And we would all need to be prepared to go way back up here to a more conservative model, frankly, when positive cases show up in the community, when multiple positive cases could show up in the community on site and or just generally, and or if case rates in counties spiked or shot up, then we would pull back so that we could see what's happening. I've been likening this just as it's snowing now. You might notice that your vehicle or your bicycle does not stop the way that you want it to stop. And I started thinking recently how it was just last week we talked about a train and that the train moving along its track, we could look back at where we've been at trying to figure out how to do safer school in the future. But it's difficult to stop a train if you see something dangerous right in front of it. And that's what I was going for, is the idea that when we get the momentum of being in person, we have to be ready to pull way back quickly, because you only know a couple weeks afterwards who you were contagious with and how it was contagious. So at any indication of really infections being likely among our community, we have to pull back in order to really be in control. And so I was thinking, as I was watching my kids put their bikes away, and as I was thinking about biking in the snow myself, which is not something I'm very skilled at doing, and I was hearing about all the car accidents today on the roads, I was thinking, this is something to think of. What we know is that the roads are icy and they're getting icier. And so we can't be going to school in person if we know that's the thing that makes being together dangerous, right? Is that things are getting icier. What we want to see are more controlled conditions that allow the roads to be more controlled. And as these case rates fall down, then we know that we can be a little bit more in control of how to be together. But right now we have hazardous conditions out on the being in person road, and we really got to pay attention to that. And so for those of you watching, Holly, I don't see any questions in the Q&A yet.
There is a comment.
Let me know. Oh, there is. Okay. There is one other thing that I want to share, but I suppose I just want to, identify that in terms of operating during a pandemic, we are doing something quite challenging. And we have been used to, in Minnesota at least, canceling school for snow, right? So we had two modes basically. We had in person, and then if it snowed, we knew what a snow day was, and we lived with it. And a couple of years ago, we had a lot of snow days, and it started to sort of drive people a little bit batty. And that was just 3 days altogether inside, if I remember correctly. And we got a little bit used to weather delays from cold. So 1 or 2 days, maybe at worst, and it would interrupt our lives. What I see us doing now is we've actually jumped after a weather delay, and even after sort of sustained weather delays, and even past a known problem that thankfully we haven't experienced in the Twin Cities in quite some time. So, a tornado or if a train crashed near our school, we would call school off for a few days at least in order to assess how it's safe. And so I am going to show a thermometer that shows how we're planning for emergencies. And I suppose what I want to identify is that over the last 6 months, there have been a variety of experiences that I hear still described on the news and on shows as being unpredictable. And I guess what I want to identify is that whether it's what I've heard described as the uprising in Minneapolis, the demonstrations and protests of the murder of George Floyd, separately the riots and the civil unrest that happened at the same time as the protests, and the same things that have been happening in similar cities all over the United States, they create a difficult and I guess what I've heard described as unpredictable, Holly, I'm trying to zoom in, unpredictable setting for especially for students. I do want to identify, however, that we could anticipate some of the things even in those most disrupted times that could come up. And if we know right now what we would do as a school, you might feel a little more prepared as a family. And so I just want to go through that. School is open if there's no disruption to social infrastructure. That would be things like travel, metro transit, stores and banks and grocery stores, and the flow of food and commerce is open. Roads are open. Like everything's a sort of a-okay to sort of choose to do what you want to do. Utilities are working. You can gather. Everything's normal, quote unquote normal. Normal, I think, has become a dangerous word because you would expect school to operate under what we would call regular policy and procedures. We have all experienced a school delay where there's a temporary disruption to infrastructure, like there's too much snow for the buses to run, or stores got to close early. You got to get home safe because it's snowing. Then, school delays for 1 or 2 days, and we resume school. We are now, though, experiencing some things that could even go beyond this extended delay period, which I think would be a more prolonged or recurring but predictable resolution to a problem, like so much snow, it's taking days and days to plow, or so much cold, right? If we had 6 days of cold in a row, we would start to figure out a way to communicate assignments and your student would work at home. We have, though, these emergency categories. And specifically up here, I'm sharing with the school board, I'm sharing here publicly with you, not because I think these are inevitable, but just because I want you to know, just like you might have an emergency plan, if there's a tornado at your house, you want to know what that is before the tornado happens. I just want to share here that especially after last spring and thinking of what do we do around, say, assessment or keeping in touch with families or holding classes at a time when there might be great civil unrest, I just want to identify that we do have these layers of emergencies in terms of a first layer of emergency would be disruption to social infrastructure that could have developing but untested systems for resolution. And the end date for a resolution is plannable. So this would be like damage to our building from a tornado, but we know how long it takes to build the building back. We know where we could have classes in the interim. And so we would say that's a first level emergency. What we're living through right now I would describe as a second level emergency. So we've had disruption to what we can do and how we can do it. There isn't an available system to resolve this. So we don't yet have a treatment that works. We don't yet have a vaccine. We don't yet have a predictable testing and contact tracing social infrastructure. And so because of that, generally, things might be available, but we're using what I call here emergent strategies. People are inventing their own strategies of how to deal with the challenges that arise. So we're doing an ongoing needs assessment, and we've disrupted our operation. Most kids are learning from home. Most students are learning from home. The students who are on site are experiencing very different school. I want to identify that we're looking at operating this way really until those numbers of the pandemic really hold steady, and or until we have a treatment and a plannable resolution, and then we would move to a different emergency level, right? A third level emergency would be if there's a disruption to physical infrastructure, such as utilities, the availability of necessary food or treatment or civil responders like fire department or medics. And this would exclude an immediate threat to physical safety, though some people in our community may be experiencing that. Generally, then we would pause assessment, a formal pause in all academic work and assessment, and really just focus on holding our schedule for social check-ins, community meetings, and then things that serve the health and wellness relationships. And then to identify that we do have metrics for how to gauge between these, but there is a time at which if there is an emergency which has interrupted the ability to operate school, we and folks had to focus on personal security, physical security, shelter, physical safety, and a disruption to infrastructure. That we do have a plan that we would pause school, we would cancel school just like a snow day, except we would all understand that not only would there be a pause in academic work and assessment, but if any staff are available at school, we would focus our energy on responding to immediate contact from families who may be looking to use the school network to provide themselves with stability, safety, security, et cetera. And so I think this gives me, when I look at it, some perspective in that we have here 7, I believe, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 levels of disruption in what we do. And we are living in this whole year since last March, what I would categorize as a second layer. Holly, can you hear me still?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. And it looked for a moment like my screen went away. So I couldn't tell
you have been sort
So-
of stopping, but your voice.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yep.
great, good. So I know those aren't always maybe the most popular things to share, what I've shared today, but those graphics are things we will share on Thursday, and again, are things that our working groups will look at, see, critique, and refine over the next week or so, and then really that's a little bit of the background. That's like the backstage of what we've been learning and talking and thinking about, from my perspective, since April 2020, of how to get a handle on this. But really, as a school community, then especially late July, August, of how to plan ahead and what metrics we're using. So, Holly, do you see any
Yeah.
questions? I don't see anything. I see something in the chat,
Well,
but
I was going to say, I really like your
Yeah.
speedometer.
oh
And,
yeah,
and then Dave said something about the speedometer too.
yeah. Oh yeah. I see. Yeah, we do have a comment here in the chat from an attendee saying, "Can we animate the speedometer so it kind of vibrates and goes up and down when new number is released?" And having used some heavy equipment and machinery in my life, I would say that when you start to see your equipment and its speedometer sort of do this kind of thing, you should generally turn it off. You should put it in idle and just sort of let everything cool down, because this kind of vacillation means you might not be as in control as you think. And so in that same vein, I would say that we want to see a speedometer that very gently lowers and does not spike up. But all the indicators currently, the weekly ones released on Thursdays and the day-to-day reports from news media, who I know get their information directly from hospitals, from medical professionals, is that we do have some spiking up on a daily occurrence of case rates. And again, that case rates per 10,000 is an early indicator of what could be an uncontrolled, widespread spread of that virus, right? So we get indication 2 weeks late. And so for us, it's not a day-to-day, but I can pretty sure if those case rates are pretty high, then I could expect that now and for the next few weeks, they're going to stay pretty high. It's very easy in a pandemic to get case rates that spike way up and then hold up there. It's hard to take the high ones and lower them back down. And so much like a bicycle in the snow, when we feel ourselves starting to go a little too fast, we have to act early to keep ourselves safe. Because when you're going a little too fast on a bike in the snow, say downhill towards some trees, you don't speed up knowing later someone's going to stop you, right? You got to slow down as early as possible to make that crash into a tree the least painful. And so, so in any case, we are preparing for those things, and we're also preparing for times that, you know, we hope don't come, but may, in terms of things that could be disrupting to our attendance at school, to our day-to-day routines, even these ones that are currently feel disrupted already, which is really my way of saying, whether it's in the next 2 weeks or the next month, there could be times when the federal election, there could be times when, you know, forbid and hope and bless us all that nothing tragic happens again, but there could be tragedies that befall us, which call on us to be prepared to handle even more emergencies than we're handling now. In which case we are outlining some ways that the school can do that. And so again, all of that information has been preliminarily shared with the school board and some staff. Will be shared with all the staff tomorrow. And really, these are the numbers that we've been using, but are now going to be open to some critique and refinement so that you can know reliably to count on those numbers as we go through the year. And it answers that question of, but when can we go back? So, Holly, anything else we should talk about tonight that you can think of?
Let me think. There was an email today, but it was about my wife needs to know for her work more permanent plan. So you covered that.
Oh,
I
yeah.
must say, I appreciate your imagery.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks, Holly.
Yeah.
And for those of you at home, maybe listening while you're walking or doing the dishes and not watching along, all these graphics will be shared in the email that we send on Thursday, October 22nd. And these graphics also will start to live on our website, so you can look at them too. But that speedometer, you know, it has 5 general areas. And basically, if we see better numbers than current numbers, we'll go from our school resource center to a combination on site of, for our youngest learners first, more in-person offering. If the numbers go up from where they are now, though, we will possibly even go to a little more restrictive school resource center. Anyone who is not, say, an essential worker or FRL qualifying family, would ask you to keep your students at home if the numbers go up. And so we'll be communicating that also with SRC families. And, you know, I'm hearing in greater Minnesota often and reading in local newspapers I'm also hearing even in the urban counties that we measure our data on, school leaders are trying to tell people to please keep your masks on and please keep social distancing, and maybe don't go inside to that restaurant or bar this winter. Maybe just order out from there. And I'm seeing that school leaders are saying that because we want to do in-person learning, because we know that this isn't the best. But as I said in the late summer, I will emphasize that for all the adults listening, and if you're not an adult, then you can zone out or twirl something or sort of look out the window and just sort of not pay attention for the next couple of seconds. But if you are an adult, like snap to it, and if you need to, like take a shot of espresso right now, because I would say one mark of adulthood would be to feel the urge to maybe be plaintive and complaining, and instead identify, the gratitude that I'm talking about finding is not the kind that makes you feel all sort of warm and fuzzy like a wide-eyed puppy by a rainbow in a sunset. The kind of gratitude I'm talking about is there are still so many gifts that we experience even amidst this pandemic time, and the experience of discomfort, boredom, or being tired of what's happening is not one to lament too energetically. In fact, maybe just finding a way to still be thankful for the things we have. And then again, what we're learning right now is one other way to be human that perhaps doesn't center around our ability to buy everything we want or get everything we want at the right moment. And in particular, our ability to be human with each other and experience the challenges of a society that's trying to find its way amid the pandemic is really going to go much better if we're able to be graceful and grateful with each other, whether we're resolving the way not everyone is treated fairly in society, the way we're resolving the effects of racism on our school and our society, or whether we're just resolving, the last gallon of milk and two people with their masks on at the grocery store staring at each other, both wanting it. I suggest that it's a better role model for our children to be prepared to be graceful in that moment than it is to be defensive and warned by this thing. So it looks like we have several more months of this thing around at least. And let's be honest, probably many more months. And so as you need some grounding or some anchoring, look at those charts that we shared tonight and then ask your questions. We can answer them here next week. Anything you want to add, Holly?
I want to add that kindness counts.
Alliterative and wonderful. Thank you, Holly.
Welcome. Thanks, Sam.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
See you next week.